Doing things with your OCs is great, especially if you have a lot of them. I do fun things with my OCs all the time, like making sketchbook spreads, silly doodles, random trivia facts, and, on a particularly good day, hitting them with a truckload of angst. Okay, no, I'm not that mean. But sometimes you just have to get a little silly with your OCs. In recent months, I've realized that to avoid an encounter with the void of burnout, I need to unwind from the constant maelstrom of work and also contemplating my life choices. Sometimes la vita is not always dolce, and I was in desperate need of returning to the primordial meme soup from whence I came. But how does one unwind and let loose in these circumstances? What's a quality leisure activity that I once enjoyed doing? And then it hit me. You've probably seen Draw the Squad memes floating around on the internet, particularly between 2016 and 2019. Well, that's the period where it seems like they cropped up the most, but I could be wrong here. Oftentimes they're whimsical, absurd, and in multiple cases, utterly unhinged. Before I decided to spread my silliness on the internet and join social media, I partook in a couple of Draw the Squad memes myself. I never let them see the light of day until now, but I had a lot of fun doing them. And because I want to experience the cringe but free kind of joy those memes gave me once again, I decided to dive back into the world of Draw the Squad poses. I'll be drawing/referencing 3 different bases for this video, and I'll be putting just some of my many OCs into some particularly silly poses as you'll see soon. I sourced 2 of the reference images from Tumblr, but there is one that I also found on Google. This being, I guess, what you could consider a classic base in this category. And because it's not a cup of chamomile video without me yapping at length, I'll also be talking about my thought processes while I was drawing my own takes on these 3 memes. But in any case, if you're new here and you want to see me be cringe but free and indulge in some quality memes, then make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, then welcome back to the spaghetti layer. Either way, strap your butts in because here we go! So let's start with the first image. This base was originally made by Tumblr user Mugs, who I believe also made a lot of other Draw the Squad bases during the trend's heyday. Thank you for your contributions, by the way, these bases are iconic. I actually took a crack at this base previously in 2016, I think, with a different batch of characters, but I never finished it. So I wanted to try it again. As was the case with the other 2 templates, I spent some time mapping out which character would do which pose based on how likely they were to make that pose in that specific scenario. And for this base, I decided to draw the protagonists of my webcomic. So Lark is lounging on the ground winking at the camera, while behind him, Peter is dropping the mic and Nadia is showing off her flexibility. All while Safia is in the front wondering where it all went wrong and also why she hired these flaming nerds in the first place. As always, I started with the sketch, drawing each of the characters on different layers and in different colors, so that I could make adjustments before continuing with the line art, and so I didn't get lost in the sketches when it came time to do the line art. Safia and Peter's poses were easy enough, but Nadia's and Lark's were more difficult. I don't draw these kinds of poses as much as I should, much less with the kind of extreme face angle that Nadia has, but I still did my best, so that has to count for something, right? Right? Although, come to think of it, Lark's pose was the hardest one to draw because I accidentally made him smaller than Nadia and Peter. Well, he is shorter than them, but still. So I had to fix his sketch a few times as well. Before I continue yapping about the drawing process for this piece, though, I should probably talk about what I've been up to in the last couple of months since my posting schedule has been somewhat irregular lately. Make a very long story short, for several years now I've had a tendency to get into the mindset that I'm falling behind everyone else and constantly comparing myself to other people and thinking that I'll never be a good artist. It doesn't really help that I spent my childhood thinking that breaks had to be earned, that things like high test scores and accolades were barometers for value, and that when I was in college I had a teacher tell me I'd never be a good enough artist to draw my own stories and that I would always need to hire an artist instead. Not to mention multiple people have said my art is worse than AI, and then there's a bunch of other contributing factors that, in my opinion, are better left for another time. I know they're all thought distortions at the end of the day and that everyone's pace in life is different, but it's really hard to not let it get to you. Some days I just have a lack of willingness to even try drawing the things I want to draw because I'll feel like I'm not good enough to take them on to begin with, but then there's also the feeling that I'm not trying hard enough either. And earlier this year, that latter feeling came to a head when I nearly ended up overworking myself and pushing myself past my own limits. That, I think, is what indirectly derailed my posting schedule and was the, I guess you could say, start of the catastrophe. While things thankfully haven't been quite that crazy since, to this day I still feel an urge to fall back into the pattern of constant work, and until recently I never fully realized just how often I was preventing myself from taking some time to truly decompress. Even though I know pushing myself to work constantly is a bad habit, my brain is usually like, haha, L loser, whenever I try to take a break. And then to add to the poop-flavored sundae, I started to get in my head about whether the videos I had planned would be worth making at all, because I had also fallen into the trap of seeing views as a measure of how good a video is. And if a video underperformed, that meant it was trash. Not that that's actually the case, because it isn't, but that kinda got me overthinking about my own merits as a YouTuber and as an artist in general. To be honest, I could make an entire video about that, but I digress. Personally, I feel like in a society that places such a high emphasis on productivity, it can be very easy to fall down that kind of rabbit hole. That if you're not working hard to keep the proverbial gears turning or having the kind of job that upholds this constant productivity mindset, you're not trying hard enough. And saying this from experience, I feel like putting this sort of thing on a pedestal is detrimental in the long run. On a brighter note though, I went on vacation at the end of October, and that gave me a much needed pause from the borderline mess of the last few months. It's not a cure-all, but sometimes you need to perform the art of touching grass and relaxing for a few days to give yourself a change in pace. And as an added bonus, I got to meet the wildlife. Look at these greedy birds. Rest assured though, I've still been working to get all of the projects on my plate done and dusted, while still working in a manner that's reasonable for myself. And I've also been trying to give myself at least a couple hours of break time each day. I really miss spending an hour to read every morning. I should do that more often. But that's enough of that for now, let's get back to the drawing. I used the mapping pen, one of Clip Studio Paint's default brushes, for the line art, and then got to the flat colors. I had everyone's character sheets on hand, so I just color picked everything. And it wasn't until I was nearly finished with the flats that I had a realization. I forgot the microphone. So I had to add that in before shading. This was actually the second drawing I worked on for the video, and I stepped away from it for a few days because of my aforementioned vacation. As a result, not only did I forget the microphone, I also forgot where the light source was. Although that one was kinda on me for not adding a little indicator for that. I used a medium purple for the shading, which I ended up doing for all three drawings and hadn't even realized it until I was writing this script. Looking back now, I feel like I usually gravitate towards purple for the shadows the same way I gravitate towards orange and gold for the highlights. Those two to me seem like very versatile colors for that purpose, and if for whatever reason they don't work, I can always adjust them later. Ah, the joy of digital art. Anyway, I got to the shading, light source adjustments and all, and then to the highlights. I saved the most prominent highlights for things like the hair and the eyes and the metallic bits, while sticking to a soft highlighting style for things like the fabrics. Then for the background, I decided to keep things simple, using a two-tone gradient to make everything pop. And that's the first drawing done. This one is probably my favorite of the bunch, but then again I like them all equally. I still feel like something is up with Nadia's pose, but I don't think it's too big of an issue. Hopefully. Also, thank goodness I remembered that microphone. Any hoodles, let's move on to the next drawing. Now for the next image. The process for this was pretty straightforward, much like the first drawing, so I don't have a lot to say here. This is a template I found through Tumblr user Draw the Squad Reblogs. However, the template itself was originally uploaded by the user DarkXSoulZYX, who made this along with several other gems through the Magic Poser app. It's beautiful. This guy reading the book while planking, the wacky reading positions, and then there's whatever is going on here. Since this is a 6-person template and the main villains in my webcomic are a group of 6, I felt like this was the perfect template to use for them. That, and much like the first base, it just fits their dynamic very well. So I decided to have Talia in the front with Marielle and Baraz on either side of her, hunched over the book, while Kiva is doing the planking and Aspen and Emmerich are throwing hands in the back. These two bicker a lot, so it only felt right. Come to think of it, everyone in the Dawnrise committee has a peculiar group dynamic, so when they're not dishing out questionable life advice to unsuspecting folk with scary owl lady Marielle at the helm, yes, this nickname is canon now, don't question it, things usually descend into chaos pretty quickly. This time-lapse was originally 14 minutes long, not as long as the time-lapse of the last drawing that I did for this video, but I actually wasn't expecting it to be that long when I exported the time-lapse, to be honest. This was also the first drawing I finished for the video, but creature of chaos that I am, I'm having it be the second drawing that you're seeing for the finished video. I actually forgot about this bit, but while I was looking back at the time-lapse, I saw that I had done the sketch and line art for Talia, Aspen, and Emmerich first before moving on to Marielle, Baraz, and Kiva. Was this an effort to stave off boredom? Good question. Probably. But in a way, it was also useful for me to break out of this perfectionist mindset that I typically have with the drawing process, because I feel like I have to finish the sketch before the line art, and so on and so forth. And as a result, I sometimes get overwhelmed while working on a piece. Yeah, it's bad. Anyway, I started with Talia, and then went on to sketching Emmerich and Aspen. I think the biggest struggle I had for that batch of sketches was Aspen's right foot, because at first it kinda looked like a pancake. But I was able to make it look more presentable, I guess you could say. However, that paled in comparison to my experiences with doing the sketch for Kiva. even though I kinda expected it, to be honest. This isn't really a pose I draw often either, so I had to do some problem solving while constantly studying the original base to get something that looked believable. The base is comprised of 3D models, unlike the other two draw the squad bases I picked for the video, so that really helped. Once all of that was done, I did the second round of line artwork. For the line art, I tested out a new brush that I found on the Clip Studio asset store. I fiddled around with it a bit to get the line weight and the texture that I wanted. I don't dislike the finished look, but I'm still debating whether I want to keep the mapping pen as my default line art brush. I'm still glad I gave this brush a spin though. Then I went in with the shading and the highlights. Once again I used purple for the shadows with some hints of blue and pink in the mix as well, and a goldish color for the highlights. And to finish I added a simple background and the second drawing was done. I'm pretty happy with this piece even though I forgot to add some lines of text in the book. It's fine, let's just pretend there's words in there no one will notice. There's one more drawing to get to, but before that let's cut to a quick commercial break. You there. Yes you. Do you have a shiny new character that you've created or have a character that you still don't know that much about? Don't worry, obtaining character-based revelations is just one click away with Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes on topics that include illustration, design, photography, video, and more. These classes are taught by folks who represent the top of their creative disciplines, so you can level up in your creative journey worry-free. You'll also get curated sequences of classes to guide you towards your goals, an active community of fellow creators to give you feedback, and certificates and badges to help you celebrate your accomplishments. If you want to get inspired, learn new skills, and make new creative discoveries, look no further than Skillshare. But what kinds of classes can you expect on the platform? I've mentioned this class in a previous video, but the lessons I've taken away from it have been very helpful in my writing adventures. The aforementioned class being Writing Fiction 5 Exercises to Craft a Compelling Plot by Lisa Ko, author of the contemporary fiction novel The Leavers. As the class name implies, you're given 5 different exercises regarding a plot for your story, character development, and more. Among these tips is making a list of 10 facts about your character. These can be anything from a character's hobbies to tidbits about their pasts. I put this to use with the characters of a book I've been working on, and long story short, it gave me some very useful insights on how I can better utilize their narrative voices and get into their headspace while writing from their perspective. And I've known these characters for years. But wait, there's more! If you join Skillshare using the link in the description, you'll get your first month free. Yes, you heard that right, the first month is free. So don't miss this special opportunity to level up your skills. At a discount! Thank you to the folks at Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And speaking of the video, let's get right back to the topic. For this last meme, I'm going with a classic base. I've seen this template floating around a lot, and during my recent internet travels, I actually found out this base was inspired by the cover of a learning company software catalog from 1991. However, I couldn't find who drew the base originally, so if you are the original creator of this image and you happen to stumble upon this video, please let me know so I can credit you properly. Anyway, as you can see, this base features 8 characters, which is very ambitious. But with that in mind, I figured what better thing to do than to bring back some faces that haven't been featured on this channel as much as they probably should be. Last year I redrew some childhood OCs that were part of a very old action/magical girl-esque story of mine. That video got a follow-up in February. A third video is on the way, and I plan on redesigning the villains of that story, all of which have their own juicy lore as well. Unfortunately, I won't cover all of them in one video because it's a very big cast, so if you've been following that redesign series, then stay tuned for when parts 3 and 4 drop. But back to the memes. This was the most ambitious of the 3 drawings that I did, but also the hardest one of the bunch. I spent who knows how long trying to get the perspective right and figuring out the placement of the desk and the couch. So I was studying the original reference image that the base was most likely inspired by. Still, I decided to draw the characters before defining the furniture fully because I was going to have an aneurysm otherwise. Or so I thought. So in front of the laptop we have Teresa, Elea, and Celestina looking at the screen in shock and horror, with Hyunjung standing behind Teresa as Adalia side-eyes the screen, Shika tries to hold back their laughter, Alienor is seemingly pleased with herself, and Kaisa is on the couch reconsidering her life choices. For anyone who doesn't know, these folks are a bunch of knights who wield elemental energy. There's a bit of lore behind that, but I imagine that when they're not doing knight things, they would do something a bit like what's going on in this image. Like maybe watching some movies or some unhinged videos or having a little tea party, normal people stuff. To that end, you may also have noticed that unlike the knight outfits that I've drawn everyone in previously, Teresa's group is in their casual outfits. Prior to this, Teresa was actually the only character of the bunch that I designed a casual outfit for, so I was pretty much winging it with the others. But I wanted to give everyone an aesthetic that best suited them. I really should do this more often, to be honest. In the original base, the word sin is flashing on the computer screen. Immediately, I decided to put an image of pineapple on pizza. Because there is no greater sin than to put pineapple on pizza. Facts, by the way. Once again, I color-coded all of the sketch layers to make things easier and drew everyone on separate layers so it would be easier to reposition and resize everyone if I needed to. And as it turns out, that would end up coming very much in handy as I was working on this drawing. I mentioned that I sketched the characters first before refining the furniture, but in a plot twist straight out of a horror film or something, that turned out to be a mistake. I adjusted the characters and the furniture multiple times during the sketching process, but I hadn't realized that I didn't correct the perspective with the chair. So I had to redo that while also adjusting Teresa's pose because that was off, along with several other characters whose poses had to be fixed because of my smooth brain move. Oops! I ended up spending more time on the sketch and line art than I was hoping, and because of this, when the time came to color and shade everything, I wanted to go the simpler route. Having recently finished this piece as of writing this part of the script, I can confirm that no less than 10 aneurysms were had while working on the sketch and the line art alone. Even while making unserious drawings, this problem still finds its way back to me. Fortunately, I eventually got to the flat colors, which also took me longer than I would have liked, but it's fine. I started out with a green background, but early on I had to put a medium pink background instead because I had trouble seeing where some of the flat colors ended and the original background began. Even though I did go back to the green once the characters' flat colors were done. I used purple for the shading as with the last two drawings, but this time I went in with blue later on for some depth. The highlights were more simplified than how I usually render them, primarily to save time, but also because I decided to experiment with different rendering styles. When it comes to my art style, there are many things I want to work on. Towards the end, I realized one of the couch arms was blending in with Celestina's hair here, so I went in and fixed that. Then I added a touch of ambient lighting, and for the finishing touch, I put the pineapple on pizza PNG. And that's the last drawing. Honestly, I miss drawing these folks and I'm very glad I brought the whole group back for this piece, but at the same time this was more challenging than I thought it would be. Looking back, I'm pretty sure there are still perspective issues and some other things I would need to check, but you know what? I can't be bothered to make adjustments anymore. I have 5 functioning brain cells and all of them were obliterated trying to finish this drawing at a reasonable time. But anyhow, let's look at all of these drawings again. And that's all of the Draw the Squad memes for this video. Again, sorry for being mostly MIA these last couple of months. Aside from the reasons I mentioned in the video, I currently have like 5 or so projects that I'm juggling right now, including a new batch of videos. But even though I'm trying to do things at my own pace more, I want to do my best to get back to something resembling a regular schedule before the end of the year. I have some more entries for the Chamomile Yaps About Character Design series in the pipeline, as well as some more individual analyses for the playable Uma Musume characters, as the denizens of the Spaghetti Nation seem to enjoy those. And I might do some art studies as I want to unlock more than 1% of my brain power when it comes to my own artwork. So yeah, some more quality content to look forward to. Yay! Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this epic meme video, and remember, sometimes to survive the horrors of this world, you must become silly. But that is going to do it for this video. If you like this video and you want to see more from me, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more art-related videos and shenanigans. If you want to support me further, make sure to check out my webcomic and social media accounts, along with my Ko-fi and my Etsy shop, and feel free to join my YouTube membership and my Patreon for more exclusive goods and content. The links to all of these are in the description. Lastly, if you made it this far, leave a pizza emoji in the comments section below. And make sure to keep things civil in the comments, or I will put a whoopee cushion in your chair when you least expect it. And yeah, that's about everything. Thanks for watching.